We know that Abzan will be in the final, but will it be Canada and Paul Dean, or will it be an all-Japan final featuring Kazuyuki Takimura? Second semi-final right now. Hello everyone, welcome to the second semi-final of Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar. Louis Scott Vargas, Brian David Marshall, and me, your host, Rich Hagen, with all the action. There is barely a card to put between these two players, but somehow we have to separate them. We do that with the best 2 out of 3. Will it be this man advancing to the final? Kazuyuki Takimura of Japan, the silver level pro, 2-5 at his first Pro Tour, but then better and better, 11-5, 11-5. Now he finds himself one match away from the championship game itself. Or will it be this man on the other side of the table? One of the great stories this weekend, the Magic Online Pro Tour qualifier winner, Paul Dean, in his 4th Pro Tour from Canada. BDM, we said hardly a card to put between them. What happens here in this Abzan slugfest?
I mean, this is going to be very similar to what we saw last year at the start of the Pro Tour in Honolulu. But one of the big cards that's come into this is, of course, Hangerback Walker, which is one of the cards we're going to see from Paul Dean. It's in his opening hand. And, of course, Gideon, ally of Zendikar, has been a huge addition for the new iterations of Abzan, right, Luis?
Definitely, and the addition of Battlelands, like Canopy Vista, are also pretty instrumental in making sure that the mana base is, I think, substantially better than it has been in the past.
Do you feel like there's any incentive to go beyond the boundaries of the Abzan colors?
Well, both players actually have Smoldering Marsh and Sunken Hollow, so they could play other colors if they wanted to, but I don't actually think you need to in Abzan. Jeskai is, they like having access to Crackling Doom, which offers an effect that's not easily replicable in blue, white, and red. Abzan kind of has its bases covered here.
So the two players very early here in Game 1. We talked in the last semi-final, Luis, about the fact that the life totals themselves weren't necessarily indicative of who was ahead. Is this a kind of matchup where actually life totals are more central to giving you a guide to what's happening in the flow of the match?
Life totals are important. I mean, clearly, you can, if someone's at 3 and someone's at 21, that's meaningful. But both players have the full set of Siege Rhino, and I would say in general, being ahead on board is kind of more indicative. Just because, yes, you can be behind on life, but if you have 2 creatures out, then you just play a Siege Rhino. All of a sudden, that life total discrepancy doesn't seem to matter very much.
Right.
And a lot of times you'll see these players using their life, taking a hit to set up their board so that they can, deal with your threats and then crack through.
And speaking of Battlelands, there you see Flooded Strand gets Sunken Hollow, even though there's no blue spells, because that's a way to make it so a blue-white fetch land can add any white, green, or black mana, by getting the right land.
That is a very not obvious implication of the Battlelands.
It isn't, but I think just about everyone at the Pro Tour kind of got there.
Absolutely. But I'm saying when you're looking at the idea that you would go Flooded Strand because you can get the 3 different colors, even though you might not need all of them.
And you see, one of the things that has helped Paul in this round is that he's able to play a turn 2 Hangerback Walker, and Takimura did not have a turn 2 play.
Yeah, so Hangerback Walker can get bigger, but it'll take a while to get that big. Because we are going to see Arna Fenza the Foremost, the legendary human soldier.
The card's had quite the impact already. We saw Paul Dean playing with it and getting in, for 8 damage on turn 4 with a Warden of the First Tree, level it up, play Anafenza on turn 3, attack for 8. Not the draw he's gotten this time, though. He's
So Anafenza unfortunately getting cut down to size here, but if she had remained in play, she kind of negates the advantage of Hangerback Walker. She says it doesn't die, it just gets exiled. Besides the fact that Anafenza has incidental hit against cards like Den Protector and in the green-white matchup, which is no longer in the tournament, of course, Death Mist Raptor as well.
Yeah, also makes it a little more difficult for you to delve as, you don't get creatures into your graveyard.
But, I mean, that's an advantage. And you're not really paying for it either. You're getting a 3-mana 4/4 that makes your other creatures bigger when she attacks.
6 very powerful spells in Takimura's hand across the casting cost range, 1 to 4.
And unfortunately, no lands. Since had he had a 4th land, he would just be slamming a Siege Rhino here. That's generally just going to be right. Maybe potentially a Gideon, but I would say it's still more likely to be a Siege Rhino. Instead, he's got his choice of kind of like medium plays, like play a face-down Dead Protector and say go, hoping next turn to unmorph and get back a Flooded Strand maybe, or play a Warden of the First Tree and make it into a 3/3. But none of those things are quite as appetizing as playing a Giant Rhino. And even though Takimura doesn't have many battle lands left in his deck, if he drew one, they would come into play tapped here because he only has the 1 basic forest.
It is the face-down Den Protector that is the choice for the Japanese player. Had the choice of whether to play or draw here. Paul Dean sneaking in by the tiniest of margins into the top 8. 0.06% over Javier Dominguez of Spain. And congratulations to Javier on a tremendous weekend. 12 and 4, just missing out on his first Pro top 8, but I'm sure he'll be back.
And so Paul Dean now doesn't have a Siege Rhino either. Neither player can play a turn 4 Siege Rhino for different reasons.
Yeah, I was going to say very, very different reasons.
And unfortunately for Dean, he can't put a big threat into play. But he can still, if he would like, he could Dromoka's Command down the Den Protector there.
I'll make you sacrifice an enchantment, and they fight.
Yeah, you sacrifice an enchantment, so that was ability number 2, and then they fight. So abilities 2 and 4 on Dromoka's Command.
So Paul Dean could have made his Hangarback Walker a 3/3 and fought, but instead he chose he'd rather just have 2 1/1 flyers in play than a 3/3 Hangarback Walker in play. He's just going to the air.
He's just assuming that the game is going to start getting bogged down on the ground and he's not going to be able to get his Hangarback Walker to die, or is he worried about a Silk Wrap or something? I don't know. I haven't looked at the...
So Takimura doesn't actually have Silk Wrap. I think he's more worried about maybe like Anafenza plus a Murderous Cut or some sequence like that. He's just choosing to get the 2 1/1s. Also because these decks don't have very many ways to interact with tokens. So I think just getting the 2 1/1 flyers gives you a more reliable clock, as you see Dean fetching out another battle land there, a Canopy Vista.
Still no land for Takimura. So this time, having done the face-down Den Protector play last turn, he goes with the last turn's plan B, as it were, which is the Warden of the First Tree.
And Takimura's got 2 Dromoka's Commands in his hand that he can't cast this turn either.
Yeah, the way his mana is working out, he can't actually cast Dromoka's Command out. Sunken Hollow does not help to tap for Dromoka's Command. But this is kind of one of those classic battles where one player's on too few lands, the other player is on slightly too many. But given that the Gideon ally of Zendikar was the draw for Paul Dean, that goes a long way to mitigate his flood.
Knight ally.
So here's my knight. I'm super impressed with Paul Dean because he's very
go,
chatty
didn't
and
attack with his flyers there. Is there a good reason for that?
I don't really know. So the Warden levels up to a 3/3, and then if you attack, I think he's worried about Dromoka's Command. So Dromoka's Command making a Warden fight the Knight ally and then attacking Gideon would kill Gideon. So leaving back both 1/1s means if that happens, you get to double block and kill the Warden. So now if Warden comes in, you can actually, if you want, you can triple block, or you can just chump with one of the creatures. Either way, Gideon is surviving. So yeah, attacking would be, I think, a little ambitious there. So there's basically there's 3 different blocks here. Block with the 2/2, block with the 1/1, or block with everything. Blocking with everything doesn't do great against Abzan Charm, or really even Murderous Cut. Blocking with just 1, of course, just means that you know it's going to get chumped. Blocking with 2 is actually a little bit better than blocking with 3 because of killing one of them. But in the case of fighting, it's actually equivalent. So had he blocked with all of them, Dromoka's Command would have been not an out, but it would have turned on Abzan Charm and Murderous Cut to be worse for him. So it's actually just balancing the 4 copies of Dromoka's Command versus the Murderous Cut and 4 copies of Abzan Charm. So he played around the 5, not the 4, and it turned out that Takimura had the 4.
Another knight from Paul Dean, and now the card he drew this turn, Unoffensive the Foremost.
And he also has Abzan Charm up, so now he's hoping that Takimura has another trick, because then he can just Abzan Charm the Warden away. And Takimura finally draws his 4th land. And Wooded Foothills has exactly 1 forest that can come into play untapped left. So that is going to be crucial here. Setting aside a card immediately. I wonder
is that a I'm not going to play that card? I know I'm not playing that?
I think so. It's kind of interesting. It could be like, I'm going to play this card, but he can't actually cast Gideon this turn. I think that's the card he set down.
Yes.
Because even though Wooded Foothills can get Canopy Vista, it'll come into play tapped.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you know Paul Dean's on 1 spell at max. You can't necessarily put him on a removal spell just because you might have to evaluate this game as if it doesn't matter that he has one. But either way, that Warden doesn't have a great attack.
How much time did you guys put in testing to just like working out all the implications of the fetch land, battle land interactions and, you know, what the sequencing would be for the lands?
That's actually a big part of it. Just a lot of the practice, you know, with almost any of the decks is which order to get your lands and which lands you want to play, because you can actually build an Abzan mana base, you know, without Windswept Teeth if you really want to. It is possible to do that with Flooded Strand, Pluto Delta, Wooded Foothills, for example. And there's just a lot of permutations, and you have to decide which ones make the most sense.
Love the Polluted Delta, Wooded Foothills, Abzan list.
Well, you know, given the
it makes total sense.
Red off-color lands. Takimura goes with a play which is rarely wrong.
Okay, so Siege Rhino comes down, and that'll swap 3 life points.
And that doesn't feel great in the face of an active Planeswalker, but that's the best that Takimura's got right now. If he had a way to kill Gideon, he would certainly use it. And that was one of the big losses for Abzan, is they don't have Hero's Downfall anymore. They don't have unconditional kill a Planeswalker. So if you're going to attack, presumably you would have attacked before. So my guess is that he's not looking at attacking. Though it looks like it might be on Paul Dean to just decide whether to cast Abzan Charm end of turn here. Drawing 2 is certainly appealing, but it might be safer just to kill a Siege Rhino. So what Paul's going to do is potentially end up with too many spells to cast in the same turn, but see his draw steps to evaluate his options. And the fact that he drew a Polluted Delta means that he now knows that he doesn't have another spell to cast, so he's more likely to just have to use Abzan Charm to kill the Siege Rhino. Had he drawn a removal spell, I think he would be more comfortable drawing 2 with the Abzan Charm. But Paul can also attack first, especially since you get the counter off Anafenza, and then maybe see how blocks happen. And Abzan Charm is a very powerful combat trick. The combination of +2/+2 or just exiling a creature means that there aren't that many ways for this to go wrong for Paul. In fact, you know, a double block on Anafenza works out reasonably well. If Siege Rhino just blocks the Knight, then the Knight gets +2/+2. So if they have to like double block the Knight, is maybe Takimura's best option here.
2 cards.
Confirming that Dean has 2 cards in hand.
Which we've told you are Delta and Abzan Charm.
Yep. And you're looking at the important one on your screen right now, the Abzan Charm.
So if I had to rank things in order of disaster versus not, the most disastrous is probably like Warden on the Knight token, Siege Rhino on Anafenza, because then Abzan Charm makes Anafenza a 5/5 and makes the Knight token trade with the Warden. But I think that double blocking the Knight token leads to the best outcome against Abzan Charm, because Takimura has a lot of life to play with. That's his biggest advantage.
That's where he ends up.
Double block this. Yeah.
So now Paul can Abzan Charm to basically kill any one of the creatures, but he's down a Knight and an Abzan Charm for just one of those 2 creatures. So that's a good outcome for Takimura. He's actually happy with that exchange.
Is it a tough decision? Paul's taking his time.
Well, given that adding ++1 counters doesn't actually help here, Paul could actually just deal 4 with Anafenza and just pass the turn. There's no reason to do something right now.
Yeah, that's where he ended
because
up.
Either way, Abzan Charm just exiles something. So now he just makes another Knight token with Gideon. And presumably just passes. Again, you're not playing as counter spells. You can then use Abzan Charm later here.
I find kind of fascinating that that fight with the Hangerback Walker to make 2 tokens that have never attacked, right? He's basically used them defensively and just as an extra blocker and keeping things back. You talked about the idea of worrying about the Dromoka's command, but I thought that was a very interesting play by Paul Dean, and I don't mean that euphemistically at all.
No. and again, he's playing around Abzan Charm or Anafenza plus Murderous Cut, that sort of thing. I think the way the game's played out, and given what Takimura has in hand, it actually worked out much better for Paul if he had kept the Hangerback Walker in play. But it just happened that Takimura just didn't draw any Abzan Charms, and given that, the Hangerback tokens have ended up on Gideon guard duty more than anything else.
So we said that the board itself was where the game was most likely to do one, where you get the most sense of what was happening here, which isn't always the case in Magic. But right now, you're looking at Gideon, ally of Zendikar, with 4 tokens on, 4 counters on loyalty. Then the Knight ally 2/2, Anafenza the foremost. And we see a little block there, and here comes the Abzan Charm that we've been waiting for a little while out of Paul Dean.
Yeah, and I think Takimura expected the Abzan Charm. That attack from Paul Dean looked very much like, I'm trying to bait you into blocking to get wrecked by Abzan Charm. So now Takimura is just going straight for the face, especially given the backup Siege Rhino. Makes a lot of sense to just pressure the life total.
I mean, Paul Dean is out of cards.
Yeah, he's hellbent. He's got 0 cards in hand.
Takimura still has plenty. Look at that. Hangerback Walker, Warden of the First Tree, Gideon ally of Zendikar, Dromoka's Command, just laid a Siege Rhino. Good stuff from the Japanese player.
So Paul Dean's looking for a high-impact card here. If he could draw a removal spell to kill Siege Rhino, he could actually attack for quite a bit of damage. He can attack for 12 damage with just the Planeswalker plus the token plus the Anafenza, knocking Takimura down to 5. So that would be pretty big. So that would be pretty high up on the list.
Part of why he fetched during his upkeep there.
Yeah, increase his chances. Warden of the First Tree is actually not a bad draw either, because if Takimura doesn't have a removal spell, Warden, and we're now in the phase of the game where Warden becomes an 8/8 trampling lifelink.
Yeah, there's some. I mean, these things are pretty big right the way through. I mean, the Knight tokens that are sitting there, the 2/2 allies, they are super outclassed on this board, or certainly potentially as the game continues.
And at 9 life, Paul Dean pumps the brakes, says, I'm going to leave Anafenza a token, another token back, and he adds the Warden in the First Tree.
And I think given the draw of Warden, it makes more sense for Paul Dean to now turtle up and try to play defensively. If he had drawn, again, like a removal spell or even like a blank, then he might have been in better shape to like plus Gideon and Smash or something along those lines. But given that the Warden's just going to flat out win in the game if it survives, this makes sense. Though, given that Takimura has a Murderous Cut and a Dromoka's Command in his hand, it's kind of unlikely that that Warden's actually going to do much. But what it will do is probably make Paul Dean waste his next turn adding counters to it. Just because that's his best path to victory. I think he should do that. And I think Takimura's going to do his best to try to play into that, make it so Paul Dean does do that, because that extra turn is likely enough for the Siege Rhinos to come rumbling through.
All right, now what can Takimura do to give Paul Dean that nudge that he would like to make sure that Paul does that? Is there a particular line of play that makes that more likely?
Well, it looks like he's just going to go for the throat here instead. What he could have done is maybe tried to sit back and offer up a block on the Warden such that Paul would be more likely to do that. But it looks like he's just going to Murderous Cut the Anafenza and just attack, and now use Dromoka's Command to finish off the Warden.
Yeah, Anafenza is actually...
So again, we're just attacking straight at Paul Dean. We're not messing around with Gideon at all, and Dromoka's Command will be able to snipe the Warden. Though depending on how Paul blocks here, Takimura's going to have to be careful that he doesn't end up losing one of his creatures by accident. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Thinking, says Paul.
I kind of like the double block of the 2 Knight allies on the Warden here. It's not great against Dromoka's Command. In fact, it's very bad against it. But I think Paul Dean's in the phase of the game where you just have to assume your Warden of the First Tree is going to survive. Okay. So I think either way, he's in a bit of trouble here. But the double block here would I think have given us slightly more outs, though still the Dromoka's command does exist. So this ends up putting him in a better shape than the block that I would have made, just because I would have made a riskier one.
Sure.
So this ends up working out better for him. I do think he's gonna in an uphill battle here still.
So Paul Dean's attempted to level up his Warden in the first tree, and Dromoka's command has been cast in response.
And as long as Takimura does not have the Warden fight the Warden, as long as he has the Siege Rhino fight the Warden, then it doesn't matter whether Paul levels it up again in response, because a 3/3 is just not going to take down Siege Rhino. So really what Takimura has to decide here is where he wants the +1/+1 counter.
He puts it on his Warden. Yeah.
Okay. This is night. I did this.
Yeah,
Is it before or after? I'm asking if it's a 3/3.
No, 1, 2, 3, and stack.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
So 1/1.
I heard the word stack.
Okay.
Yeah, and Paul was trying to see if he could get an extra 3 life by life linking it in response, even though it wouldn't kill the Siege Rhino, but Takimura correctly, of course, did it in response.
Yeah.
I mean, no harm in checking.
Just a land.
And there's no Panglacial Worm in this format, so that Windswept Teeth was not the draw Paul was looking for. Gideon, Gideon does not have quite enough allies to get out of this.
Please tell me that at every modern Pro Tour playtesting house you start out with a Panglacial Worm deck.
I wouldn't say we start out with one, but that the name gets mentioned a lot. So a Windswept Teeth from Takimura is significantly better because now he can actually play Gideon if he so chooses.
It's not often that you actually see a game where there is a Planeswalker on one side and has been there for a while, and it's not that it hasn't impacted the game. Of course it has, but
Yeah.
it's going to be on the wrong side of the argument against a player without a Planeswalker.
And Dean's forced to block the 2 creatures that don't have trample.
Activate.
Okay.
1 damage.
Okay. 1.
So 4 damage comes through. Paul Dean's down to 1. Everything's dead except Gideon. And Gideon likes to be an ally, but likes to have something to ally himself to. And right now, there's nothing. Yep, so there you have it. Kazuyuki Takimura takes Game 1 here in the best 2 out of 3 semi-final. We will be back with Game 2 and hopefully a Game 3 after these messages.
Outfit your Magic collection with the newest Battle for Zendikar accessories from Ultra Pro. You can see the full array of card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and portfolios in your favorite Magic artwork at ultrapro.com. Friday Night Magic has expanded to include all formats. Get ready for Commander, Legacy, or even Conspiracy drafts. Check out your local store for details and share your FNM stories by using the hashtag MTGFNM. Visit magic.wizards.com/FNM for more information.
Now, we did say, gentlemen, that these two lists were very close to identical for Game 1. The good news is that they start to separate after as we head into Game 2. Why don't we start with our Japanese player, Kazuyuki Takimura, and show you what he's got available. Well, he starts off in Planeswalker Land with Sorin, Solemn Visitor, a couple of Tasiga Golden Fang. We've seen plenty of those in the top 8, as we have Wingmate Rocks. Double Duress is an option, a Self-Inflicted Wound, one of those. 3 Silk Wrap, one of the real standout cards of the weekend. 3 Transgress the Mind, nice to see. A card from Battle for Zendikar there at the uncommon slot. And we end up with 2 Ultimate Price. So Takimura, 1 game up, Luis. Where does he go?
Well, Wingmate Rock for sure. That's always been one of the classic mirror breakers in Abzan. Self-Inflicted Wound. This card was a lot better before Gideon Ally of Zendikar came out, because eating a night token is significantly less impressive than basically any other option.
Mm-hmm.
As for the rest, I'm not 100% sure which mix of removal he's going to want, because Silk Wrap is good and versatile, especially since it takes out Hangerback, but it does have some vulnerability to Dromoka's Command. The Dromoka's Command is a card that people tend to board out in the mirror against cards like Murderous Cut. So it's a kind of interesting balance there. And then, of course, Sorin is still a good card in the mirror.
Let me ask you about Wingmate Rock. People talk about why is that not a card you see more main deck And you see it more as a sideboard card in a lot of these matchups as a mirror breaker.
Well, both players have 2 copies of Wingmate in the main deck, and they just have an extra copy of Wingmate in the sideboard. In Takimura's case, and at Paul Dean's case, he's just stuck on the 2. But yeah, green-white decks that play 3 to 4 in the main deck. It's a very powerful card right now.
So that's Kazuyuki Takimura. He has a loss to give because he's 1-0 up in this best 2 out of 3. His opponent, though, Paul Dean from Canada, his sideboarding better be right because he has to win this one. He also has 1 Planeswalker in his sideboard, but it's not gold, it's just straight black. And Ob Nixilis Reignited out of battle for Zendikar. You can draw a card, lose a life, destroy a creature, or just give your opponent an emblem, which kind of kills them in a hurry. A couple of Den Protectors, 1 extra Abzan Charm there you see, 3 Duress, Ruinous Path, again from Battle for Zendikar, Surge of Righteousness, 2 Tragic Arrogance, which I saw a lot of people reading this weekend, interestingly, 2 Transgress the Mind, and 2 Ultimate Price.
Well, one of the things that's actually kind of interesting too is the 4 copies of Onofenza do make Hangerback Walker a little less good than it would normally be. And if I'm Takimura and I'm looking at playing against a deck with 4 Onofenza and 2 Tragic Arrogance in the sideboard, Hangerback Walker is looking a lot less exciting. So I could see him trimming down on the number of those. I don't know if he can remove all 3 of his, but it is the kind of card I would at least think about because against Tragic Arrogance, getting left with a 1/1 flyer, for example, is not that interesting. And if you've sunk a ton of mana into Hangerback and get Onofenza plus Murderous Cut, kill it and exile it, that's not great either. Paul does have some good mid-range options here. Ruinous Path, Abzan Charm, Den Protector. These are certainly the kind of cards I would expect to come in along with those Tragic Arrogances.
So would you, it sounds like you like Paul Dean's options a little more here.
He has more. I like Wingmate Rock more than all the other options, but Tragic Arrogance is pretty close to it, and Paul does have, I think, more good cards to sideboard in than Takimura does.
So that's the players gearing up for game number 2 out of 3. And as I say, Takimura has been very impressive. He's learnt fast at the Pro Tour because he came into Journey into Nyx for his first Pro Tour in Atlanta last year, went 2-5, didn't make day 2. It's really hard to do at your first Pro Tour. Then he had 2 back-to-back 11-5s, kept chaining the invites together. That's exactly the threshold for coming back one more time. 7-7 last time out, but here in his 5th Pro Tour, he has really got the job done. Silver Pro, and he's 1 and a bit matches away from turning that into platinum for Brian David Marshall. 2 whole years. This is if you're going to win, if we're going to be greedy, if you're going to win a Pro Tour, the correct one to win is the first one of the season.
Absolutely. We saw Ari Lax do that, get into his first top 8 last year, got him platinum all last year, which is also now carried over all the way into this year. And it's it is what you want to do when you're playing Magic professionally. You want to know that you're going to be able to connect with a good playtesting team. You want to know that you're going to be able to continue to get the repetitions and the shots at making the top 8, getting that win, and being able to be a reliable playtest partner for your teammates.
Certainly, and you said it's not easy to make day 2 in your first Pro Tour. Well, it's not always easy to make day 2 in your 30th Pro Tour either, sure. As I have come to discover. So it's a pretty outstanding performance by both of these players.
But I mean, genuinely, we go through before the tournament, we look at all 367, 400 plus players who are qualified, and so many of them, you look at their histories, and it says 2-5 at their lone PT start, 3-5 at their lone PT start, 1-6 at their lone PT start. Just making day 2 is a real accomplishment.
I talked to one player yesterday. He was playing in his first Pro Tour. He said, "I went 8-8." I'm like, "You made day 2."
That's great.
In fact, it was Ricky Chin's friend Max Auger. Max Auger who went 8-8. And, it's like, I guess his first Pro Tour experience is a little diminished by Ricky Chin's first Pro Tour experience, but getting to day 2 is a major accomplishment. It's really when you start playing Magic professionally. I mean, it's one of the things you check off on the list, right? You're like, made day 2 at a Pro Tour.
Absolutely. But for both of these, they've set themselves a lot higher, and now, as we see an awful lot more spells, and that looks like just a 1 land in 6 for Takimura.
And both players chose to ditch their opening hands here. And Takimura would not have kept this hand without the scry. And he didn't keep it anyway, but he wouldn't have considered it without the scry you get now after you mulligan.
So here's the scry for Paul. That's a Warden of the first tree, I believe. Being pushed
Pushing
to
it,
the
looking
bottom.
for a couple extra lands there. Is there a point where you just push anything that's not land?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Like
I
even
think
when
that
you have a
given that
couple
Paul
lands.
Dean pushed a 1-drop,
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I think he's got to be firmly in that mode. I mean, it might be that his lands end up in such a manner that Warden is not optimal because he's got like a tap land followed by a 2-drop. But in general, if you're not looking for a 1-drop, you're not looking for anything that costs mana.
It's so hard to shuffle your deck.
It's so hard to shove on your deck, says Paul.
Is that the double sleeve that we see a lot of the Japanese players do? I'm curious what.
Yeah,
what
I wouldn't be surprised. I've been known to double sleeve, in older formats, but in general, I do not do that. It's a good way to protect your cards.
Yeah, that's definitely what it looks like. His deck looks taller than
5
Paul Dean's
spells.
deck.
5 spells. There's a Warden of the first tree, but so what? You just can't keep it.
All right.
Well, better up a game than down a game, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, Palavita Dharma Rosa was one down when the double mulligan struck in Game 2 against John Finkel this morning. We saw 2 of the greatest players in the history of the game going at it. It wasn't a great match. It was 2-0 to Finkel. There were some mana issues. But that's the nature of the game. You can't always guarantee the drama. But these 2 still going at it and waiting to see which of these 2 will face Ryoichi Tamada from the Japanese World Magic Cup team 2015.
Paul Dean being introduced to the realities of live television. He would like to step away from the table for a moment, but they said, well, let's see if you can wait till after this game.
Right. Oh boy. Crunch.
Yeah.
Well, Masashi Ueso is the first player I remember always doing that with their standard decks and modern decks at every Pro Tour. Just, looked like they're playing 80 cards sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. 4. 2 land, 2 spells. Well, there's a land, a siege, 2 land, 2 spells. It looks like Dramoka's Command and a Siege Rhino to go with 2 land. He gets to scry, so that mitigates things a little bit. He's actually thinking about where that card is going.
Yeah. What do you think about here in terms of what do you want to see on top off of that?
Well, I would keep, for example, a Hangerback Walker. I would actually keep a Warden here, given that you're on the draw. And keeping a land certainly makes sense.
Right. Yeah, because that takes him to 3 straight away. That's what we're looking at in Dean's hand. Siege Rhino, Dromoka's Command, Abzan Charm, Murderous Cut, and the Flooded Strand.
So Dean actually is in a spot where he just drew a Wingmate Rock there. Dean's not going to have a play next turn if he doesn't draw a land. If he does draw a land, he'll presumably get to Abzan Charm, kind of be out of it. But if Dean doesn't draw a land next turn, he actually can't play a card, and that could get Takimura into this game.
Mm-hmm. But remember, basically, you have to be Gabriel Nassif to win off 4. That's the general rule.
Well, it is very difficult to win on mulligans to 4. It's happened before. It'll happen again, but it is certainly not the norm. And you notice that Paul Dean didn't sack either of his mismatched Flooded Strands there, so he could have gotten lands, but he wants to leave more lands in his deck.
He said not judgmentally at all?
No, I'm just remarking on a fact, because it is just like, a factual piece of information, which certainly doesn't reflect on Paul Dean's character in the slightest. So I like sacking them now, because now if you draw a 3rd land, you want to be able to cast Abzan Charm, and given that you have to get a double battle land, that you wouldn't be able to, unless you drew you could draw a basic and then go basic Plains Sunken Hollow, like Forest Plains Sunken Hollow, but I think sacrificing them here is worth it.
So let's see whether Dean gets to do something on turn 3, or gets to do the miserable something being pass. It's a land.
No, he gets there, so he's... Takimura has no idea how close he came to getting a significant advantage here, because now we're kind of assuming that Abzan Charm is going to hit between the Abzan Charm and the draw step. It's probably going to hit a land, and if it doesn't, it's going to hit cards that Paul Dean can cast. So there's a pretty good chance that Paul Dean has kind of dodged this sort of obstacle.
Takimura starts casting Siege Rhinos next turn though.
It's true, but if Paul Dean can hit a land, he's going to start casting them first. Granted, rhinos don't run over each other, so that at least is nice.
So we've got the sideboard notes on what these guys did. Dean went up an Obnixilus, an Abzan Charm, a Ruinous Path, and 1 Tragic Arrogance, taking out 2 Walkers, 1 Silk Wrap, and 1 Dramoka's Command.
It's actually worth noting that Dean didn't hit the 4th land, so his play was relegated to Hangerback Walker Go. And I think Takimura has 3 Siege Rhinos Dramoka's Command and doesn't. And did he not have a draw a land? No, he drew a Wooded Foothills.
He had a Wooded Foothills in his hand when he passed the turn, actually. Takimura had added Sorin, Tassiger, Wingmate Rock, and a Self-Inflicted Wound. Took out 4 Gideons and 1 Hangerback Walker.
All right. So Takimura less of a fan of Gideon in this matchup, since he just taking out all 4 indicates. You know, maybe it's that he sees like the Ruinous Path and the Tragic Arrogance actually, because Gideon's not actually that great against Tragic Arrogance, because if you make a Knight token, then you're going to end up in a spot where Tragic Arrogance is very good against you. This game could be over very quickly. I mean, Paul Dean does have a Murderous Cut, which he is going to be able to play here, so the first Siege Rhino is not going to do it. But if Paul Dean continues missing with a hand of like Wingmate Rock, Siege Rhino, you know, the cards like that, then Takimura could get into this game. He's got, you know, double Siege Rhino, Gideon, Wingmate Rock are all uncastable currently for Paul Dean.
Takimura definitely sat up in his chair and rolled up his sleeves. I mean, he feels like
for
the first time he's gotten a glimpse that he might be in the game.
Well, he might have mulled the 4, but if Paul Dean can't cast the 4 expensive cards in his hand, he mulled the 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Card advantage sometimes
That's a Gideon.
Stuff in the hand you can't do.
And we're in the reverse of the first game here, where Paul Dean is the one stuck on lands with all spells in hand, and you know, and again, we're going to see if the player who's stuck on lands draws the 1 extra land they need, I expect them to run away with the game. But Paul Dean does not have a ton of turns for that to happen.
Paul's probably got 2, hasn't he? He's got 2 draw steps to start, because as soon as he gets 1, there's Siege Rhino back again. They can start staring at each other.
An uncastable Ruinous Path. He doesn't have
Paul.
double black.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Paul.
And wow, you know, Takimura has the fantastic play of Onofenza plus Dramoka's Command to kill your Hangerback and exile it if given that Paul Dean and Paul Dean's going to be the one forced to make the first move.
Yeah.
So what I predict happens is Onofenza comes out and Paul Dean's going to try to use his Dramoka's Command to fight it, and the response Dramoka's Command is just going to be devastating.
Now, Paul's been fantastic all weekend long, but he is showing the pressure here because he watched Takimura mulligan to 4. You have to feel you're in great shape at that point. Just the math does that for you. And now here he is, and okay, there's Onofenza to go with Siege Rhino.
And Paul has to go for the play of
Response.
of use this. So it looks like he's going to do this in response. He's just going to make 4 tokens. And this actually makes it so Siege Rhino can't fight either.
It's still this on the stack.
All right, so I like this play because this leaves Paul Dean in a much better shape than he would be otherwise. So basically, he's going to end up with 4 1/1 tokens in play, and the Siege Rhino has going to have 4 damage on it, and so presumably won't be able to attack.
Because once Onofenza hits the battlefield,
then the
Hangerback Walker gets exiled instead of going to the graveyard, and you never get the tokens from it.
Okay.
So here come the tokens, and the tokens represent time.
Yeah, which is all Paul Dean needs. He's got a handful of great spells, so he's really just hoping to hit a land this turn.
Land.
Well, Onofenza, not the worst draw. It's certainly better than another uncastable. Though Takimura has his own Dramoka's Command. And given that Takimura has a pair of Shambling Vents that he really wants to start getting active here, I could see fighting Onofenza end of turn with his Onofenza, so you end up putting a ++1 counter on it. So you end up with a 5/5 Onofenza that can attack without fear into 4 Thopters, that makes Siege Rhino into a 5/6, or makes Shambling Vent into a 3/4. So I really like fighting Onofenzas here.
Yeah, there's no tenable blocks at all for Paul Dean under that circumstance.
Yeah, it doesn't actually matter which one fights Onofenza here. You just want you want to kill the Onofenza and get a ++1 counter on your Onofenza.
So back we go to Kazuyuki Takimura, who mulliganed to 4 in this game.
And he's actually in a spot where any land, lets him activate, I guess it has to be a black land, lets him activate Shambling Vent. And the fact that he's not attacking with Shambling Vent indicates to me that he's most likely drawn a spell, which is very bad news for Paul Dean here.
Wow, Paul Dean goes to 4.
Wingmate Rock.
Wingmate Rock.
Oh my gosh.
Absurd.
The saying about a rock in a hard place is very true here.
Oh, Paul knows, and
I didn't really want to win anyway.
I didn't really want to win anyway. That is a classy line in what is a terrible moment for Paul Dean. Okay, he says.
He's on 3 of a kind Gideons there.
Oh. Yeah, it's easy to be
Yeah,
gracious
he has Gideons
when you
over
win.
Siege Rhinos.
Yeah. Yeah, and Paul Dean has shown a ton of class this weekend. I know that when he played against Owen and Owen beat him in the last round, afterwards Paul Dean was, like you said, he would have done this exact same thing. He bore no hard feelings. I think that's the mark of a very mature Magic player.
There's the handshake. Paul Dean shrugs, and it is Kazuyuki Takimura who advances to the final by 2-0. And we are going to have a Japan versus Japan final, Brian David Marshall.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be Abzan versus Jeskai.
The classic battle. Are we still in the land of Khans of Tarkir?
Yeah, this is where we started the Pro Tour last year.
Yeah, it's the circle of life.
It really is. So, Kazuyuki Takimura up against Ryuichi Tamada. That is who we will see. Jeskai, Abzan. We knew Abzan was going to make it to the final. And we've seen these 2 Japanese players just navigate their way beautifully through the top 8. Nothing seems to stop them. It's best player in the world, doesn't stop them. Mulligan to 4, doesn't stop them. Super complicated board states, doesn't stop them. Here they are.
Yeah, I always, obviously winning on the Mulligan to 4 is always impressive, but it's always, there's a lot of people, at home, not on the professional level who'd see a hand of 5 and just go, oh, I'm not going to 4. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to scry once. I'm just going to keep this, whatever. And, that ability to go, well, what do I have to do to win and to dig down and find the cards and, he did it.
It was certainly the right decision to mold that 5-card hand.
I've been impressed by both the Japanese players we're going to see in the finals today because I was also impressed by the semifinal win by Ryuichi Tamada.
Yeah, he's been absolutely tremendous. And in fact, he was part of the best match of the day, arguably, which was the quarterfinal against Ricky Chin that started us off. Seems a long time ago now, but that went best the full 3 games. Green White Megamorph against Jeskai.
I'm going to always remember his game 2 against Finkel. Actually, I was just really impressed by how that played out and how he really outmaneuvered the best player in the world with his sideboard plan.
Yeah, terrific stuff. So we will await the final for Jeskai against Abzan and make sure you get every play. And this is best 3 out of 5. Now, we don't only see that now in the finals of Pro Tours. So, Luis, any sense of whether that tips the balance one way or the other, Jeskai over Abzan?
It's going to let them sideboard differently based on what they see in each intervening game, but yeah, it's going to be still a pretty close matchup either way.
All right, well, why don't we find out more about the final matchup? Let's hand you back to the news desk. Here comes Marshall and the team.
Thank you, Rich. Welcome back to the news desk here at Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar. So our finals are set. Let's take a look at the road to the finals here for our 2 finalists. In our bracket, you can take a look here at our final moves as... well, we had a John Finkel, Apollo Vitor Rosa, Owen Turtenwald, you see Martin Mulla, all have fallen. Ricky Chin's out, and that leaves us just with Kazuyuki Takimura versus Ryuichi Tamada. All Japan in the finals. Now, we're actually going to take a minute here to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at, well, one change that we had at the Pro Tour was announced just a few days ago. We also followed up with it with an announcement we had with Hélène Bergeau here at the news desk a little earlier today, is the Constructed and Draft Master, which is a World Championship seat now, if you haven't heard. So the player that performs the best at the Pro Tour in Constructed and the player that performs the best in Draft each earn a seat at the World Championship. And guess what? Since we're into the top 8 here, the Swiss portions are done. It only counts the Swiss portions. So we're going to take a look at who's our leader as we move into further into the season here. So let's take a look at the Constructed Champion seat right now, or the Constructed Master seat, I should say. And it's Autumn Burchett at the top there with 27. Yeah, she has just gotten out to a huge lead here with 27 constructed match points.
Yeah, that's 9-1. She missed top 8 on tiebreakers. I mean, she wasn't particularly close on tiebreakers, but she was in that, top 16, tied for top 8, virtual top 8 scenario. And then if you look at it, the next 5 players on the list all did, in fact, make the top 8.
Yeah, and I think that we'll see that, but this is going to be the thing that measures consistency, right? All of the Pro Tours that they play are all going to add match points to this graphic here. And it should be interesting to see how this plays out that's a world championship seat on the line.
Don't sleep on the guy below the 5 top 8ers, Shota Yasaoka. That also guy? On 25 points. I heard of him. That's 8-1-1, of course.
Yeah, and that is actually, he is the most interesting name. He's actually the name I thought of when I first saw that they were doing this, because he kind of has this habit of smashing the constructed portion, and then if he does well in the draft, he's in the top 8, and if he doesn't, then he finishes solidly, near the top of the standing. So it really could benefit a guy like Shota Yasaoka, by the way. Also in the Hall of Fame now, so that's right. We'll be seeing him at all the PTs regardless.
Yeah, Ricky Chin was actually undefeated. That's 8-0-2 is how you get to 26 points. But you know what? 2 IDs, you leave some points on the table. He's not number 1.
Now, Randy, just before we move on to the draft one, it won't change anything down the stretch for the players, right?
Oh, I think there will come a point in the last Pro Tour of the season, in the last round of the Swiss, where the opponent wants a draw, or the opponent was like, man, I really need to, get invited to the next Pro Tour. Can you, do me a solid and scoop me in? And people are going to say no. It could happen with top 8 on the line. I don't think it's going to realistically impact people's behavior until you get those deep rounds. Now, it does mean that you play out day 2 even when you're eliminated, all right? It makes you even that much more eager to get to day 2 to get those rounds. But in terms of actually affecting decision making, I think it's going to be late in that last Pro Tour when people can calculate it, and they're like, I don't care if top 8's on the line. I'm playing for a world seat.
It's great stuff.
Could be very interesting. It
could get really interesting. We'll keep an eye on that as the season winds down. Let's take a look at our other new master seat, though. This is the Draft Master. Now, you're going to notice here that this is of an 18 possible. We've got 4 players. So there were 4 players who 6-0'd their drafts here, Ian. And there's some nice names out that list.
Yeah, Brandon Burton, Sandy Dog, MTG on Magic Online. Well known there in the Magic Online
He's a draft
scene.
Machine.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he's got hundreds and hundreds of drafts under his belt.
Yeah.
But he had a fantastic weekend here. There's also an awesome article up on our website if you want to go check out his story of the weekend. Definitely recommend it. Following him up, Paulo Vitor Damarosa, also 18 points. He's a guy who's, I think, probably better known for his constructed play a little bit also than his draft
play.
play.
If I had to weigh them, I would too.
Yeah, but he had a fantastic limited weekend here as well, and of course making the top 8, losing to John Finkel in the quarterfinals. Great story there. Next up, Will Urker and Don Van Ravenswaite.
Yeah, that's pretty close. Yeah, he's from Australia, and
I did my best.
You did good, and so those are undefeated. Now, Randy, projections based on previous knowledge. We're not going to have somebody there's no undefeated in draft players by the end of the season.
6, 12, 18, 24 rounds over the course of 4 Pro Tours. I think that if this spot had existed last year, it would have been Seth Manfield.
Okay,
and I think he was 20-4. Maybe 19-5. I think that's about where, and which I was amazed that anybody went 20-4. I think that's
absurd.
That's over the course of
4 Pro Tours.
Yeah.
Right. I think that I know it was Seth, and I think the number was 20-4 for last year. So I think that's about where you got to start looking. Maybe 19-5, something like that.
Somewhere in that range is what's going to get people in. Okay. Let's move on now. Again, keeping things kind of from a zoomed-out perspective before we get down to the nitty-gritty on our finals. The players are taking a little break, getting some water, and they're going to be down in the feature match area for us shortly. But let's take a look at the metagame breakdown, because we know that a lot of you at home love to watch these things to see what deck should I play at my next tournament. Let's take a look at the day 1 metagame breakdown. Randy, what stands out to you here?
Yeah, this was what stood out to me is how close it was. It was kind of the expected decks once you rolled together all the variants, right? That Jeskai there at 18.8, that includes Dark Jeskai. It also includes Jeskai tokens. It also includes the No Splash Jeskai, which is actually the one we have in the finals. And then you see Red Aggro was definitely a big part of the story here this weekend. Megamorph decks were very well played. Esper, and then Abzan felt like a distant 5th on day 1. It's still here.
It's still here in the finals, though. Ian. Is this what you expected to see? I know you guys think and talk about this stuff a lot in R&D where you work back at Wizards of the Coast. Does this look about how you'd expect it to?
Yeah, I mean, given the presence of the fetch land plus battle land mana bases, really they turbocharge a lot of the Khan's 3-color cards. Of course, when you have such flexible mana, those are the cards that you want to cast. They're very powerful for their converted mana cost, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
In addition to that, Red Aggro, always a mainstay, always seems to be around. won the last 2 Pro Tours, lost a lot in the rotation, but players found a way to compensate for losing cards like Lightning Strike, Stoke the Flames, Searing Blood, and so on. And we saw these red aggro decks kind of shift more from the burn-oriented builds into the combo-oriented builds, we're almost calling them here, with cards like Become Immense and Temur Battle Rage.
Which we saw take down a lot of players, by the way, down in the feature match over the course of the weekend. Didn't quite make it to the finals, but we got there. Now, let's transition to the day 2 metagame now and see what made it in past day 1. So the day 1 metagame, of course, outlined what people brought to battle with, but this is the stuff that actually made it through. There's a wrinkle here, of course, is that this does include their draft performance, so it can muddle it a little bit, but still, these are the decks that made it through to day 2. Randy, what stands out to you here?
Yeah, advancement percentage is the real story for me. You see red aggro tick up a little bit, and that's actually fueled, if you look at the breakdown in more detail, it's fueled by red-green landfall decks. They did better than the Atarka decks with the combo. Jeskai also did quite well. You know, Megamorph fell off a little bit, largely because the 3-color versions of Megamorph got just crushed. 33%, 44% advancement for Bant and Naya. Green-White did just fine. Esper, I thought, was going to be the big story. I mean, looking at this advancement, it felt like, oh, okay, the pros have figured out how to actually build a good control deck and how to succeed in this field. You know, they're going to continue to rise up the Swiss, and oh, yeah, death to Siege Rhino. Abzan got crushed. Awesome.
70% advancement for Esper?
Yeah.
Oof.
That includes Esper Control, Esper Dragons, and Esper Planeswalkers. I think that the Planeswalker heavy builds were the best ones. We definitely saw Obnixilis joining Jace, joining Gideon in the best performing Espers, but none of them actually managed to get through to the top 8. So I don't know. Once that winners metagame finally came together, sort of late in the Swiss on day 2, Atarka Red dropped off. Like the decks that rose to the top of the Swiss were decks that could beat Atarka Red. So I don't care about that advancement percentage. When push came to shove, Paulo was the only guy who could get through, and he kind of limped in like lost, draw down the stretch. Yeah, and apparently a couple players had a good Abzan list, like maybe a little more aggressive. Maybe they were just got the matchups. I don't know. I mean, we all ended up with 2 Abzans in this top 8, despite the day 1 advancement looking pretty weak.
Yeah, you know, we do hear the pro players talk about their deck being a good day 2 deck. Yeah. That kind of thing pops up, and these are some of the numbers that do it. But the players are seated down in the feature match area. They're getting ready. They're settling into what's going to be a best 3 out of 5 match to decide who gets to take home the $40,000, the trophy, the platinum status, the seat at the World Championship. Winning a Pro Tour, especially the first one of the season, I think you said it earlier, Randy, it's 7 PTs that you end up getting qualified for
and
off of this one win, and World Championship as well. Let's take a look at our first player, Ryoichi Tamada. Again, from Japan. Both of our finalists are from Japan. I know that everybody watching on the Nico stream is going to be going crazy with an all-Japan finals here. Tamada, 31 years old. He's a silver pro, Ian, coming out of Japan. This is his first top 8. He's got a couple of GP top 8s as well. He's going to be looking to leave silver pro in the dust here, though.
Yeah, I've been super impressed with Tamada's play in this top 8. Marshall, you and I were in the booth earlier this morning for the quarterfinals.
Yeah,
I mean,
great.
Those games were awesome.
Insane.
I mean, yeah, he really just turned around games where I was sure he was going to lose as of turn 4 or 5, and it was just awesome to see that play out. And then in his match against John Finkel, I was also similarly impressed. He had a really unique sideboard strategy there.
That sideboard gambit was just brilliant.
He boarded out his Jaces, I think.
Yes,
which
he
is
boarded
like
out all of his
unheard of.
2-drops.
I was out there with the Pantheon guys watching, and they're like, just throwing their hands up in the air like, what? Who does that, you know? And then the mastery of the unseen being really key in game 2 there, as well as choosing to draw, another unique play. So, I mean, this is stuff that is unexpected, but like astounding at the same. I mean, it worked for him, right? It's not just like he did something we didn't expect. He did something we didn't expect, and then made us all look like fools because
why weren't we expecting that?
He won because of it.
And that's not like he just made that up. That was a plan. Like he clearly came into this tournament saying, you know what I'm going to do against the Dark Jeskai lists?
Yep.
Get it all out. No Jace, no Seeker, put it all on the sideboard, turn myself into a control deck.
And I love that preparation, having an unexpected plan that he is prepared for and with and comfortable with.
Hey, his deck edge in game 2 against Finkel was just gigantic.
Yeah.
Yeah, after that sideboard. Let's take a look at his list here so you guys have some context for what tool he brought to the table here to battle in the finals. He is on a Jeskai list here. Randy, Is this a list of the tournament here? I mean, we saw the Dark Jeskai deck kind of come to prominence, but here we are in the finals, and it's just good old Jeskai.
Where's the fancy splash?
Yeah.
I was promised fourth colors and fancy black cards, and no, this is, I mean, not just is this a 3-color Jeskai list, he doesn't even have Soulfire Grandmaster. This is Seeker of the Way beatdown Jeskai, or at least it looks that way in game 1. And all 4s, like Ian described it earlier as a 9x4 deck, just all 4 ofs, but then the 1 Silk Wrap, the 3 Treasure Cruises, 24 lands. Looks simple, but what you get when you're all 4 ofs is you get consistency, you get the most copies possible of the most powerful cards in your deck.
Yeah, it looks like a sweet list, and we're going to get to see it in action shortly. Let's take a look at his opponent here, Kazuyuki Takimura. Again, also from Japan, and this is his first Pro Tour top 8 as well. Silver Pro,
Yeah.
2.
Yeah, similar to Mata, he's on the start of a good career here. He hasn't broken through as like a household name just yet, but 34 lifetime pro points, Silver Pro, that's a great start, to an outstanding career. And here in the finals, this could be the exclamation point that kind of gets him going here. So,
and we've seen this a lot from a lot of the pro players. A lot of them kind of knock at the door for a long time, and then they finally get that one breakthrough, and they never look back. Think of names that we didn't even know a few years ago, like Sean McLaren. There was even a time Reed Duke, where it was this is some Magic Online guy, and then he wins one Magic Online championship, and now he's just a household name for Magic. And this is the kind of thing that we see happen pretty consistently, and certainly an opportunity for one of these players to do it. Why don't we take a look at Takimura's deck list here? He's playing Abzan, and again, looking at this, Ian, where are all the bells and whistles here? It's just straightforward.
who needs them?
Yeah, apparently.
That's kind of the story here. The finals is these guys, they're not splashing anything. They're keeping it nice and simple, nice and consistent, straightforward. I love this list. Lots of 4-ofs, lots of powerful cards. There's nothing here that makes you scratch your head. Everything's got its place.
Yeah, this is going to be a sweet matchup. It's going to remind you of the good old days, but it's got a few new twists to it as well. And the players are ready to go in the feature match area. Let's head down to the booth for the finals here from Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar.